Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. Welcome back. So we are here for Storytimes for everyone, and this is our third week. I appreciate you all coming back and joining us. Got a couple of hours of new information, some practices, and some brainstorming and ideas and tips that we can all use in our early literacy programming. So I'm going to hand this over to Pamela, and I muted you. Do you want to unmute and do your screen share? Thank you for coming back, everybody.
I can't share screen.
Oh dear, and we're getting some feedback. There we go. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. You should be able to now.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Okay, welcome everybody. It's great to see you here. Thanks so much for, again, being willing to spend a couple of hours with me as we come into our third and final session. Today, here's an outline. It looks like a lot. Some of these points are pretty short, so don't despair. We're going to finish up looking at the practices. We didn't do write and play the last time we were together. Take another look at early literacy tidbits and some different ways they can be used, and doing some practice with practices, and taking a look at workshops based on the manual to see if some of you want to expand your early literacy programming in different ways for adults and children. And then if we have time at the very end, some kind of brainstorming about a kind of program that we could do with parents, so and care providers. So here we go. So remembering from the last time we were together, we're talking about making connections between the early literacy components and the practices: talk, read, write, sing, and play. We did not get to all of the practices, so today we're going to be looking at the two that we didn't do, which are writing and playing. First of all is writing. So reading and writing go together, in part because both of them are expressions of the spoken word on paper. Okay, some children actually learn to write while they learn to read, when they have that really good, strong phonological awareness and the association between print letters and the sounds they represent. Writing, like language, has a developmental kind of curve. So this probably looks familiar to many of you. It's your basic random scribbling done by a young child who perhaps is just now able to take a crayon and just make some kind of random shapes, not even shapes, just movements on paper. And from there, they move on to some scribbling that kind of looks like it might be writing. They're kind of getting the idea that there might be some shapes involved with writing. And then scribbling, I look at this as though this were a child's kind of interpretation of something that an adult wrote. And isn't this delightful? Personal cursive from a Chinese speaking child, because we know in Chinese that they read from right to left and from the top to the bottom. So that would be their letters, of course, wouldn't look like ours, or their characters wouldn't look like our letters. Eventually, letters forms, shapes, looks, an L, an H, it looks kind of random. We don't really know what the child is doing just by this, but definitely can see that they're turning into something resembling letters. Then there's this really delightful stage. In preschool, it's called Inventive Spelling, where there's a lot of sound letter relationships expressed in letters. And notice the lack of vowels. The I, they've got the I down. Here's an A for sat, but there's another A. It's like maybe we have a couple vowels here, but remembering back to when we looked at the letters or the language as children learned sounds, it was mostly the hard consonants that they learned first. Your basic background, letters that are backwards, this is all very classic young child writing. We know that proprioception, the sense of body in space, is important to writing, and that's one of the things that children learn when they do finger plays and things like that to help them. Puzzles, you know how in puzzles the knobs are big for younger children to help them with that pincher grasp. Now, play is a very complex thing for us librarians to promote and do. I think part of the problem we have is that it doesn't always feel appropriate given some of the restrictions we have around the kind of noise levels that, some patrons get upset when it's loud. And so what kind of play is appropriate in our spaces? Well, that's something that we all need to decide for ourselves, because we know that children learn a lot about language through different kinds of play. And so we do want to offer children the opportunity to do some play in the building. So play helps children think symbolically. It helps them, they can use their imaginations in ways that are fun and creative. They can solve problems. They learn all kinds of skills and are able to do all kinds of things through play. There are different ways of playing. There's structured play. So this is like when children have guidelines, like a game that literally has instructions and rules. Often the adult kind of mediates the game because of the understanding of the rules. Children can also make their own rules for structured play. Unstructured play is well, what it sounds like. It's more open. It's not necessarily or probably not mediated by an adult, and children just, play. Play activities that are interactive and initiated by a child can be scaffolded and supported by an adult. And that would be a situation where perhaps the adult might have some ideas in mind around, for example, using spatial language if they're doing block play. And there are different types of plays you can see here, and also down here with the images. Objects and toys encourage different kinds of play. So, if you've ever gone shopping for your library looking for toys, there's a label on there and it tells you what age they are recommended for. And that usually has to do with the developmental and cognitive stage or level of development of the child for whom that particular toy was intended. Now, with functional play, children are playing or exploring an object. And it's also like when they're active, exploring their body through maybe some planned activities, manipulating things and sorting things. That's functional play. So constructive play is literally, again, what it sounds like. It's constructing or making something using perhaps clay, Play-Doh, arts and crafts experiences, using crayons and paint and paper and things like that. And dramatic play is make-believe or pretend play. And it's facilitated by the use of puppets, costumes, props. And that's where you can really see children using a lot of imagination, creativity, where it's good for symbolic play. They can like take one thing and make it into another. A pencil becomes a magic wand, or wings and they're flying around, or a scarf and they're a superhero kind of activity. So in the library, we offer different kinds of play. Something like this. This is obviously pretty clearly directed by an adult, where you put a symbol from some of your songs and you toss the die, and whatever comes up is the song that you're going to sing. You can make when you have your kitchen and early learning areas open again, and introduce some writing and creative play into the kitchen area by turning it into restaurant play, or a mechanic's garage. Lots of opportunities for vocabulary and using different kinds of tools, literally different kinds of play tools, as in repairing vehicles. Block play has a lot of opportunities for us to use spatial language. We know from research that children who use more spatial language when they're young have a better grasp of spatial concepts when they're older and in school. Playing with letters after is, you can talk about shapes, go on a letter hunt, mix them up, all kinds of different things that you can do. Most of this, again, probably after story time. Here we go with reenacting, narrative skills, knowing how stories work as part of background knowledge, retelling stories here. Conceptual development here with puzzles. Notice the size, indicating that they're for younger children because they're easier to grasp, and the matching and the textures. So all this has young child, clearly. Things like making an origami house could be part of a storytelling activity as well. So we're talking about early literacy enhanced story times. Part of that is actually, I think probably you could say, the key part is communicating with adults during story time. Not the key part, but a key part that's different from let's call it a typical story time that doesn't have early literacy enhancements. Here's a review of what we talked about at the end of last week's session, okay, with our early literacy tips. What are they and why are they? The what is the highlighting one early literacy component, and the why is because when we do this through example and then giving them ideas on what they can do at home, we're encouraging that the adults who spend more time with the children than we are able to help their children develop their early literacy skills through these interactivity and intentionality in what they're doing with the children. We saw this last week, but now we are more familiar with the practices. We know that you can take a practice, use the definition of the component, and tie it back to one of the two processes of reading, okay, either decoding or comprehension. Before we break up into groups to talk about how we're going to do this, I'm going to share with you some more examples, okay? And this was the other format. When the activity, and then are helping children, the definition, this will help them, and then the last part, decode or understand what they are reading. So, some of the people from Michigan librarians shared with Kathy, who shared with me some grab and go activities. What I have done is taken part of those activities out. I'm not including the books, the songs, and the other elements. I've chosen one element from these grab and go sets, and I'm turning them, adding to them an early literacy practice and tidbit aside. So this is these are some more examples of how this might work. So for example, this story time was all about snowmen, right? So there are books, songs, poems, all the things that you need to have a good grab and go bag. So I'm just adding an element, and I'm using the practice talk. You could ask questions, right? You would need to have some instructions in here, adult saying to the child, etc. For example, where do you think the measuring stick should be placed? Why? What if we put it in the sun? What would happen if we put it in the shade? So the information for the adult, when we talk with our children, we can help them learn new words and ideas. This helps them understand the world we live in and concepts when they are reading. So there's the practice, right? Is talking. Here's the definition, new words and ideas for vocabulary, and then tying it back to reading. One example. Another set that was shared was about turtles. There was a number of books in story books, picture books about turtles. So I chose to function on the fact that there were nonfiction titles that were also included. Granted, you could pick another element. These are just the ones that I chose. Read. When we read information books with children, we can help them learn new words by defining them. A big vocabulary will help them understand what they are reading when they are older. Okay, so here's the activity, the practice read. Learn new words, vocabulary. And then I stated its vocabulary and tied it back to understanding what they read. So many opportunities with Bear Says Thanks, right? So much that you can do with this book. So this is the original format that was included. They're all solid ideas. It's just that there's a lot going on. And I think sometimes you could maybe pick one or separate them out, give them a little bit more space so that it's more clear how you're differentiating among them. So here's an idea for this. Talk. What are you thankful for? So that is from this. What are you thankful for? I'm just expanding someone else's good ideas. That's all I'm doing. What does it mean to be thankful? Give your child some new words to help them describe how they feel. And then the kind of definition, tying it back to reading. Singing helps children hear the rhythm of language. Tying it to decoding or figuring out what they're reading when they are bigger. Reading. Okay, here we are pointing out words for vocabulary. Oh no, sorry. This is print awareness, to see that print has meaning, which will help them when they're learning how to read. And then play and write, using two of them. Decorating Thanksgiving placemats with images. Writing, showing them the relationship between what we say and what is written, which will help them decode or figure out what they're reading when they are bigger. So one last one, apple pies. When I first saw this, I was like, oh, well, this has got to be about patterns. Because I really enjoy, I think I mentioned, I enjoy doing math based on story, jumping off of picture books and story time ideas. So many things you can do with a, recipes. You've got the literal recipe that print has meaning. Instructions on how to cook something. What comes first, second, and third, right? That helps them understanding how stories work. Narrative skills, part of background knowledge. Ingredients, point them out, like your cans and your boxes for letter knowledge and print awareness. And a pattern, over, under. There are patterns in songs, stories, and mathematics. this was just pick the one you like, really, because all of these things would work fine with this story time. I think just when we start thinking this way, there's that kind of shift in our thought process that is like we look at something that we've been doing and then think, well, what early literacy component or practice feels natural? There are these components and practices in every book, but some of them are just lend themselves to that more easily than others. So now we're going to take a few minutes to practice again. So you have the example tip from the last time, but that you can write on. But now you can do the practices. Okay, so what we're looking at here is that you can take out your form. Yours probably won't be this color that says intentionality, early literacy practices and components working together. And then pick one of the practices, or you can use the word of the practice or not. You don't have to. If it feels comfortable, do it. Otherwise, don't. Find your example and then how you would like to communicate that. You can put how you're going to communicate that in your story time, your ideas column there. What do you want to say? Now, remember, when you're actually doing this in life, you can use little notepads and write your your aside on it and stick it to the back of your book. You can also do the same thing with note cards. Write your aside on it and stick it on the back of the book or on the thing you're going to be talking about. So this is just practicing. Look at your story time or use a book. Think of which early literacy skill you want to highlight, and then see if you can do the example tip and the empower tip. Try to do both, okay? And so we're going to take, I think we said about 10 minutes to do this. Kathy's going to split you up into small groups, and then we'll come back and see what people's level of comfort is with this, and see if there's any information I can help you out with, if there are any issues or any sense of, anything else you need to know.
All right. I'm going to open up our rooms here, and don't forget, if you're not on camera because you're multitasking, you can participate in the chat with your group as well. So go ahead and join your group if you don't mind. And we'll see you guys back in 15. And thanks for rejoining us, Pamela. I'm going to hand it back over to you.
Okay. Well, the group that I had the pleasure of being with did some really wonderful, had been practicing, had done some, tried this out. So that was really, really great to see that, and they understand how to do it. So I heard some really great explanation tips and some empowerment tips. They were complete, and had all the elements. So that was it was really wonderful to see. And we took some time to talk about ways that story times might need to be changed when people come back live, that 3-year-olds won't have been with many people for most of their lives at that point. And maybe we'll need to be really aware of some executive function kinds of things we can do to help adults and children figure out, adults too, I guess they haven't probably been with people, taking turns, keeping your hands to yourself, those kinds of things, that it will be interesting when when people are able to resume things live. Does anyone have are there any questions that I can address that would help anybody? Lots of wiggle breaks, yeah, definitely. Everybody feel comfortable doing this? Do you see anybody raising their hands? Yes, comfortable. Okay, good. Good. So a lot of growth from last week to this. That's really excellent. Good, thank you. Okay, so without further ado, we shall move along. So there's been something of a shift in some people's approach to story time, with after story time taking on a little bit more of planning, in the sense of what kinds of information, our behaviors, intentionality, interactions are we hoping to promote after story time. So we're going to take a look at some of the ideas that have been shared, that a lot of them are from the manual, of things that we can do after story time to encourage talk, read, write, sing, and play. So one of them is story dictation. This is kind of like your classic preschool activity. It's where you use drawings kind of as a way to have conversations with a child around what they've done. So after story time, you could put out paper and writing implements and ask the children to draw a picture based on something they liked in the book. And then the adults literally ask what the child, what is this? Asking open-ended questions and write the child's words. So this, again, children are seeing that the spoken word can be written, the association between the letters, as the person writes the words, and the adult is modeling listening and writing. So story dictation can be a really powerful thing. Now, there is some tension between these after story time activities and the kind of conversation that adults really need the opportunity to have with other adults. For some grown-ups, it's probably the highlight of story time is when they get to chat with their fellow story time attendees. And so I would say one needs to strike a balance between doing and saying, like, kind of incorporating in the activity as part of story time and still allowing time for the conversations to take place after. Since babies, especially babies that aren't crawling, they're pretty happy, sitting and getting out some toys, for them to use. Giving adults can then chat while their babies are playing. It can be somewhat less structured. There are lots of ways to promote writing after story time. So, for example, writing cards, like obviously if there's an occasion like Thanksgiving, it's pretty obvious, but even like thinking of you, if you do a story time on kindness, that somebody mentioned in the group I was with, acts of kindness are things like writing cards, putting letters out for children to trace because they need to understand letter knowledge, right? And what better way than actually giving them letters to cut out and play around with. They can also use those letters to write their names. Making letters out of pipe cleaners or clay, for some children learn best through movement, including like the smaller like hand movements and grasping and things like that they need to be able in order to hold a writing instrument. And always, talking about letters and sounds and books, that you could just make that part of an after story time activity. There's lots of letter knowledge associated with writing. So you could say as a preface to what you're doing, and we're gonna play around with letter knowledge today by doing some writing, and just put out the materials and see what happens. well, not just put, I mean, do give some explanation if you have something in mind, obviously. Learning letter names and sounds, singing the bingo and seeing how many letters you can squeeze into bingo. I like the idea down here of making a puzzle out of children's names. Again, I took these from the manual that we're going to be looking at in a little while. If they do a puzzle, then they can take these letters home with them and make puzzles out of, or write the names of other people. You could give them a set of alphabet letters and encourage them to make the names of the people in their families to learn still more letter names and sounds. And this is tricky. When we ask children to find letters, we often want to say, find the letter M, but they might not know the name of the letter M, but they might know the sound. So we can ask children to find the letter that represents the sound, and its name is M. Because remember, researchers recommend that we teach both at the same time, both the name of the letter and the sound it represents. So making a collage is something that could be really fun as well. So you could see that playing I Spy, it starts with a particular sound. Well, that's phonological awareness and letter knowledge. You could also use a collage to talk about environments, insects, okay? You can use it to develop background knowledge, depending on whatever cues you come up with, like for the collage. If your suggestion, you write it like on sheets and post it near the tables where adults are, play I Spy is something that starts with a particular sound, or pick an environment from the magazines and talk about it with your child. All those Ranger Rick and My Big Backyard, if you get those magazines in your children's section, and if you get them in print on paper, hopefully you save them, and some of them anyway, and use them for this kind of programming. Learning new words through using a word jar. You could actually have your own word jar that you take out at the beginning of story time. And when you have a new word, you could open up do it ahead of time, write the words on a piece of paper and put them in your word jar. And you can take the opportunity after that story time to talk about the new words. You could have this as a take-home activity for adults to do, to discover how to keep track of some new words and to have fun with reading them, guessing meanings and things like that with their children. It's hard to remember new things immediately. Repetition is important for all of us in terms of our ability to remember things. Think about when you're learning a foreign language, how much concentration it takes. And remember that unfortunate curve for those of us that are older, the amount of energy it takes according to, and then how much gain there is as we get older. But little kids, not that much effort with a lot of reward. Some more ways of playing with vocabulary, making a book with it, encouraging them to draw pictures using those new words. Remember, we talked about the spiffy giant, writing a book about who's spiffy, who's not, or things like that could be really fun. This would definitely be for your older preschooler, or even if you have kindergarten class coming in, making up new words, playing around with the sounds in words. And the example that they give is there's a walk-in in my pocket. And of course, Jabberwocky, which is probably too long for this age group, but a good example of using made up words. I thought this was such a fun idea, getting interesting and funny pictures from magazines and having the adults and children write a caption for them. I just like that. What do you think the dog is thinking, and what do you think the owl is an owl or an owlet is thinking? It's just this dog doesn't look like he's daydreaming about lunch, but the owl looks like if I don't look at the dog, it's probably then it's not there. So there are different kinds of art experiences that we offer children after story time. So in there's basically two different kinds that are like classically, divided into two kinds. One is there's process art and there's product art. So let's take a look at process art experiences. When you do process art, you're going to end up with things that look kind of like this. There aren't any instructions other than here's some material, here's an idea of one thing maybe you can do with it. You don't show samples, so children aren't going to copy what you have, and they can't, whatever everyone does is neither right nor wrong. It's just their idea. Some of the art is used to explore different kinds of materials or tools to use in creating art. Each one is different. Kids are relaxed because there's no pressure to do it right. And it's the child's own choice. And there aren't a lot of ideas about, process art online. I made up some over the years because there were just some books I really liked that lended themselves to that. One of them was doing a story time on clouds using Peter Spear's book. It's an old book. And there were, it was like, just take some cotton balls and fluff them. Everybody had paper and glue and see what kind of clouds you want to make. Maybe they have shapes, maybe they don't. Same kind of thing, with feathers, if you're doing birds, or cotton balls, again, for sheep or whatever. You can give some ideas, but you don't show them like, here's what I did. Because you probably noticed everybody wants it to look like yours. And one thing I have noticed in working, especially with immigrant communities, that there are a lot of people that didn't have opportunities to play with arts and crafts kinds of things in their own childhood, and they enjoy doing it. So, and also, even if they did have the experience doing it, some adults also just like to do it. And so instead of kind of jumping in and taking control over the child's project, let the adults do it too. Give the adults the material and let them make their own thing. That gives the child a fair opportunity to create their own work of art. Now, product art experiences have certain characteristics also. There usually are instructions and a sample and an example of a completed product. And the goal or the idea
Okay. Well, let's just see. If Pamela, if you can hear me, you are frozen. If you want to jump off and come back in, that might help. I think she's gone. Hi, guys. So any thoughts or comments on what Pamela was just talking about? Or maybe something to share back as we wait for her from your breakout groups?
Oh,
Alyssa.
one of my,
Oh.
everybody's talking now.
Go ahead, Jana, and then we'll do Alyssa.
Oh, one of, and I've done this like the last 3 years with my son, my youngest son, is we paint pumpkin seeds and glue them to paper. And he looks forward to like cutting his pumpkin open so he can paint the seeds, and there's no rhyme or reason to it, but he really enjoys doing it.
That sounds like a lot of fun. You could also, like, I always like the squishy pumpkin insides. I don't know why.
I always find there's kids that love it, and then there's kids that will not touch it with a 10-foot pole.
Right. All right. So Alyssa, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I kind of do a mix for the crafts between the two. Like I start off with an example and then say, feel free to do any type of interpretation you want and like do different varieties of it. But I think it'd be nice to go full on, just give them the materials and have them create.
This is Cindy, and what I did last month, we did a fall people, had all the kids, they were responsible for bringing in 10 leaves, and when they brought them in, we made leaf people. So we took a construction paper and let them put the leaves out, and then they got to put they glued it on the paper, and they named each one of their little leaf people. So it was all different leaves, they couldn't have the same. It was really cool. They enjoyed that.
I just did that with my niece and nephew like 2 weekends ago. Also animals, leaf animals are great.
Yeah.
I am not seeing Pamela back on here. We did have a 5-minute break coming up. It's almost the top of the hour. So let's go ahead and do that. And I'm going to get on the phone and see if I can reach her and help her figure this out. So let's come back here. Let's go ahead and just make it 7 minutes. So come back at 5 after 2. See you guys in a little bit. We have Pamela. Thank you.
Sorry about that, and thanks for coming back. I've done quite a few of these Zoom things, and that's the first time it has ever just like totally, my internet just shut down. If it happens, it's usually in the morning, so I was feeling pretty confident. Anyway, apologies, and thank you for Kathy's great idea to skip ahead and talk about storytime reflection, which is something I should definitely do a little bit more of anyway. So here we go. Back to things you can do after story time. So of course, one of them would be setting up this kind of really fun environment to encourage talking, right? Which is actually narrative skills and knowing how stories work. It helps children develop that ability, which helps them understand what they're reading, because they have an expectation, like a story has a beginning, it has a middle, it has an end. If you're going to do this kind of activity, where you make something and they cut it out, it's your basic process craft. Make it into something that can be turned into something else or used in another way. For example, you have 2 of these now. So that means you can have a dialogue, right? They can talk to each other. You could do, you could make a more and do the little ducks that went out to play over the hill far away kind of thing, which will become part, background knowledge, things that they memorize and learn. If you want to talk about over and under and those kinds of things as well. Now, another thing that activity you could do after story time is with a science experience or a mathematical experience tied basically probably to something that you have done in story time. So I did this, something similar to this, not after story time because I was on Zoom. But I took a clear Pyrex glass and put snow in it and showed the glass to the children and asked the question, how long do you think it will take? No, not how long. How much water do you think there will be in the measuring cup after it melts? And I had a cup full of ice. So, we made a little chart of people's guesses. Everybody was wrong because snow, when it melts down. I mean, there was the bottom of the measuring cup was barely wet even after a cup of ice. So when we're using this kind of this series of questions, it is the scientific process, which does something that children will be learning about when they're older in school. But it gives us an opportunity to talk about something that's of interest and using words that are the level 2 vocabulary words, remembering back to last week when we talked about vocabulary, things like prediction, observing, and conclusions. Those are words that's again, rich language that will help children when they're in school and when they're reading. And also just now, it's fun. You know, something I learned from a workshop was the difference between like a science experiment and something that is engineering, because we talk about STEM, right? Science, technology, engineering, and math. Engineering is when you try to make something function in a particular way. For example, if you did a sink and float kind of experience during or after story time, what will float and what will sink? You know, you put different things on aluminum boats or what have you. To make it into more of a technological or engineering experiment, you ask, how can you make that piece of aluminum stronger so that it will hold something heavier? See, it's a different kind of process where you have a problem, you think of a solution, you try your solution, and then you see the result and you try again. It's more circular than something like this, which is prediction, result. They're both good, but they're different from one another. I thought this was a great idea that the manual offered up. So put some books out that are of interest to adults and children, especially children, and ask the pairs to do this, to observe images in the book, to talk about what they see, to read, you know, some of the captions, and then to draw and write about the parts that they think are most interesting. I think that's a really fun and engaging activity. Now, playing around with math, there's so much that you can do with math. Again, I really like doing math and science with Storytime. And I recently read some research. I found it rather disheartening because of my own previous relationship with mathematics, which is adults convey math anxiety to children. And that kind of dampens children's enthusiasm about it. It's been pointed out that you hear people say, you know, I'm not a math person, you know, so like give this to somebody else. You don't really hear people say like, I'm not a word person, so just give this to somebody else. So I think we can really I'm trying to embrace I am embracing the fact that mathematics and children are a wonderful combination. We know that ability in math is a strong predictor of success in all the different school areas, right? It's very highly predictive of success in reading. So we can play with math and encourage adults to play with math in ways that are encouraging and affirming, both for the adults and for the children. And I think if we can present people with math activities that are fun and not wrought with like tension and like, oh my gosh, I can't do it, we can help with that. For example, again, this is from the Every Child Ready to Read manual. They recommend that you have adults use adding machine tape to measure the height of their children, letting them figure out how to measure, right? How are you going to do it if the adult's when the adult's taller than the child? and then have each pair write the child's name and age on the tape. After you're going to measure the child too, they left that part out, and then tape the strips along the wall from shortest to tallest. You could group them. These are like the shorters, the middle size, the taller. Who's the tallest? Who's the same height? And one of the things about measuring is you could do it with just measuring tape, not even looking at inches. If you want to literally measure it in terms of how many of something is it, in order for it to be what's called a fair measure, everyone needs to use the same tool to measure with. Makes sense, right? For example, if I'm going to use, say, how many cards tall is this book? And you're going to say, how many Post-it notes tall is this book? We're going to have different numbers. It's not a fair comparison. So there's, in addition to just it being fun, there's learning that happens all along the way, including with the adults. The larger the item you're measuring with, the fewer of them you'll need. What if you measured how many feet is it from here to here? You know, from here to here. And people use different size shoes. Well, yeah, you're going to have different results because you're using different tools. It's not a fair, it's not what they call a fair measurement. Now, block play is a wonderful, wonderful way of encouraging all the different components and the practices. There's so much to do. Many libraries have blocks that they can bring out after story time. I first learned about block play during a conference that I attended some years ago, and it was Pierce County Library System in Washington State. And they did a whole program doing with blocks, noting how it crosses through all the domains of early childhood. I do believe that they still have information on their website about block play. It inspired me to write a grant, and I did get money for a block play project thanks to PNC Growing Up Great funding. And we bought a bunch of really cool blocks and were able to provide transportation for care, the child care homes to come to the library to play. And understand you've already done this. I don't know, Kathy, if there's if there's information that needs to be shared about this, or maybe for the sake of time, we'll just keep going if that's okay. But I do think reflection is helpful to think about, especially as some of us haven't been doing story times for a while. So it might be a particularly good time to, after doing a few, really think about what might I need to change, because things are different. Things will be different whenever we can say that we're post-COVID. So we've been talking about activities that you could do after story time or as part of a presentation with every child ready to read, which we will be looking at soon. Also, once we want to encourage people to stay in the library, remember the idea of the library as that third place, right? We have home, we have work, and then we would like the library to be the third place where people choose to go for relaxation, entertainment, education. Well, Hennepin County Library developed some early literacy activities that can basically be anywhere in your building. And I'm going to show you a few of their examples. They were very creative, very low tech, and super affordable. So, you can get this like at craft stores, a kind of shiny mylar material that you can stick onto flat surfaces. So encouraging to talk about how they're feeling, and not just people, right? But children, because look how low the opportunity is for them to talk. I mean, the mirrors. How about talking about the words in a circle and reading this while you're talking and walking? It is, I believe, a poem. Wouldn't that be fun to put this in the entryway of your building and watching adults and their children as they stop and sing and do the motions? What a nice way to welcome people back. Maybe we should put welcome songs on the floor as people are coming back in, when we're more open and things are how they're better, different, or how they used to be, or however you want to explain it. Look what they did with their end cap. So this is just a cookie tray with chicka chicka boom boom and the letters. And I'm guessing behind this child's head are some explanations about what to do with the book, singing it maybe, and talking about the letters. We had something like this from the back of a book. It was one of the actual farm animals, or one of those titles, and it had like a growth chart, an animal growth chart. So kids would say, "Look, I'm as tall as a baby calf." Children could not walk by this without lining themselves next to it to see how tall they were, and the adults responded. They were asked direct questions by the kids, and they did respond. So following the footsteps, maybe to the children's room, maybe they're numbered, maybe they have letters on it. Maybe it's encouraging children to hop, skip, or jump. And can you find the letters in your name? And can you spell any other words? How about, can you find a letter that represents the sound or Z? So many good ideas here. And of course, again, providing all of the materials to tell and retell stories as part of background knowledge, narrative skills. Numbers on stairs. Taking the messages out into the community, seeking grant money for things like this. These are yard signs that were put up all over the neighborhood with messages about feeding the brain. People are familiar with the idea of feeding the body, but we know from research that we also need to feed children's brains with words and books and experiences. And these were bumper stickers. This was an activity to get a whole community involved in early literacy. Each of these represents an activity that you could go to the different store, see what was in the business window, do the activity, mark it off on here, and bring the bingo card back to receive a free book. The talk, play, sing, write, and read. And there was an explanation about why each one was important. And this is one of the activities from the bingo game kind of thing in a laundromat, talking about singing and sorting clothes and things like that. And a lot of people have done story walks. The ones that we did, I included early literacy activities on the bottom of the page that went along with the story, emphasizing one of the components or practices. Again, so some of them originally the idea was to get people moving, and I kind of took that and use it to encourage early literacy behaviors. Going where the people are. This was taking just lots and lots of different things from a project and handing them out, making them available to people, including free books. So with that, we're going to move on to a kind of quick perusal of the manual of Every Child Ready to Read that I believe you have copies of, right? Didn't, I think you wanted to say a few words about this. Did you want to say anything about this, Kathy?
Yeah, so I was going to mention it at the end, but I can do it right now if you
Oh,
want.
sorry, I jumped
That's
ahead.
okay. Why don't you cover this, and then when you're done covering Every Child Ready to Read, I'll touch on Ready to Read Michigan.
Okay, sorry. I jumped ahead. So this is the manual that a lot of you have access to through your state library. This is the second edition. And when you see your copy, you get the manual, you get handouts, and you can still buy these through the ALA store. They're English and they're in Spanish. You can also, of course, make your own adaptation of these. The website is still up and functioning, and it has lots of information and resources right on it. There's a history of it here, different items that you can buy, and they have made some new additions, different editions since the original came out. This, of course, is the first one that was done. It has been translated into Spanish. So if you have Spanish-speaking staff that can take the information out into your Spanish-speaking community, then this might be something that you would be interested in getting. And there also is one that you can get to work with your early childhood educators. This one and the Spanish-speaking community toolkit are digital downloads, which makes it a bit easier to use than the manual, although the manual also comes with a DVD. So that's there's that to be aware of. So let's see, I need to go back to my screen. So also in the manual or on the internet and on the DVDs, they have some video clips that you could put into your program to show, to give examples of the different activities. This is one with showing doing finger plays. And then with babies, and then another example of singing with toddlers. So you can see there, the videos and the material are very, very well done, very high, production quality. So, and once you have purchased the manual, you have the rights to use the information. They do want us to acknowledge that it's Every Child Ready to Read. I do believe that there will not be any more editions of Every Child Ready to Read, that it's not really being phased out so much as will no longer be updated. And then within the manual, there's a number of workshops that you can pick from. I'm not going to go into huge detail about these, because the manual is done so well that it has a script, it has the PowerPoint that you can download and adapt to your own particular library using imagery from your library, and you can add and take out information according to your audience. So the first part, though, are the staff workshops. So perhaps your coworkers want to know you're going to initiate a new program. You want to share that information with what it is you're doing and why. Maybe you're in the enviable position of helping to create early literacy environments. Maybe it's time for a facelift, and you're looking at your children's area and you're thinking, I need to do some things to encourage adult-child interaction, perhaps new shelving to put things down that are more accessible for younger children. comfortable seating for adults to sit down with their own children. Perhaps you want to do something, a new project with a community partner. Maybe it's your early childhood providers group that gets together, and you would like to start sharing workshops and early literacy activity nights, like with stations and all that kind of fun things that you'll be able to do. And you want to tell community partners why all of this is so important. So all of this is in the manual. And then there also are parent workshops, the parent workshop. This is a general overview. And then there's fun for parents and children. So this is like an overview of early literacy. Hang on a second. An overview of early literacy and with all the practices. And adults with children, that's this one. Adults with children have an opportunity to try a variety of activities. And then they get more specific, fun with letters for letter knowledge. And they have how to use the different practices, talk, read, write, sing, and play to help children learn letters. And then the same thing with words, vocabulary, through the practices. And then with fun with science and math for parents and children. They have one science activity, the ice cubes, and one math activity, the measuring. And then prior to doing that, they go into some detail about early literacy in general, talk, read, write, sing, and play, and a brief introduction to the components. So we're going to take a very, very quick look at the public parent workshop, the most general one. All of the programs have the same basic beginning, and this is that, you know, why reading is essential, how reading is essential to school success, the why it is important. They share, they've done a really nice job of branding their material with this little symbol, the question here, the logo and all that here, and then the comments over here. Again, affirming the critical role of the parent. So this is like, for you all, this is a review now, because you saw this in the very first time we got to, second time we got together, about the reading process. Again, the question and then the answer. And all of this is scripted. So what they suggest is that you become familiar with the script and then figure out what you want to add, that's your, put it in your own words. And then how can you kind of like ad lib it to sound more natural. Practice, if you decide to do this, practice with a colleague ahead of time, you'll feel more comfortable doing it. Before I want to go any farther, I neglected to note that these workshops, you really need to know your community if you're going to offer it to the public. It's a fair question to ask, how many adults do you think will be able to find the time, and if they come to one of the ones that doesn't include children, if they have number of children, who can watch their children, to come to a program outside of story time or a family fun night kind of activity. Some libraries struggle with this. And so rather than do the entire, an entire workshop, we'll take out the components like we did with the after story time activities, the putting the early literacy activities throughout the building, and then ultimately also or doing stations based on early literacy, either standalone, like the after story time activities could be standalone stations in the library, or a family fun night based on the practices. Back to decoding, comprehension, and the 5 practices. So you can see they follow the same format, a lot of the same language from the training that we did. They last about 50 minutes and have been, in some places have been super popular. I'm not really expecting you to follow along with this. I just want you to see how attractive they are and how some basic ideas about how you may or may not want to use the manual. This is a nice touch. Make your home a learning zone with some ideas on, making that early literacy environment so that children will have access to books and writing materials. And then this is where you can put the picture of your building here. And then from here, you can talk about specific things that your library offers, programs, materials, whatever kind of activity that you have in addition, like your grab and go kits, if you're going to keep that going, or book bundles, maybe an open block play. We did that for a while where everyone's invited to come in and play. Whatever it is you decide to do, then you can promote it through that. So if you go, I think that the most fun way of doing this is to do a short introduction to the practices and then jump right in to activity-based early literacy stations where you're going to have a station, talk, read, write, sing, play, with different activities that they can do with their child to help them experience the practices. Because I really, I'm a strong believer that the information is really good and it's very empowering and important, but people really need to see, oh, I get it, I can do this. And then that's, I think, where we can really strengthen the message around the parent, the adult, as the child's first and most important teacher, because we've given them the information and now they literally can see what it is that they're going to do through practicing the practices. So, or as I like to say, don't just do it, talk your way through it. That's a phrase that I kind of came up with when I was doing a training for care providers, because I had noticed in doing outreach story times with care providers that there were a lot of opportunities that they were being missed in terms of when they could be talking with their children. Things like getting, lining up, singing songs, marching along to a cadence, talking, lack of conversation during sharing meals, all different ways and times that children could have been hearing language directed at them and they weren't getting the words. Of course, that's not, all care providers everywhere. It was just a few particular teachers that I noticed this with. So I thought, if I could just figure out ways to encourage interaction with what people do anyway, wouldn't that be fun? Which leads us to our next little few minutes left to see what you could come up with if you, I'm going to do this one of these days. Let's say you did a story time on clothes, right? So, and your after story time activity is going to have to do with sorting laundry. So in order to sort, children have to understand how things are the same and different from one another, right? And then they sort by attributes. Oh, Kathy, did you want to jump in now? Sorry, before we do this?
Yeah, if you don't mind, if it's a good time. Okay, so
Sure.
Real quick, I'm going to put in the chat here a couple of links, and you guys have probably seen emails from me. I'm going to actually do a quick screen share as well. here of my screen. So our Ready to Read Michigan is based on the 5 practices of Every Child Ready to Read. And in the chat today, you've seen me put a link. We do have some copies of the manual for Every Child Ready to Read. If you'd like that, fill out that form. Last year, we actually, Pamela, we did give all libraries in Michigan access to the child care provider kit that Every Child
good.
Ready to Read provided. So if your directors didn't forward that your way, send me an email, let me know, and I can get you guys the link. But Ready to Read Michigan is built on that, and we've tried to give libraries some tools that can help promote Ready to Read or Every Child Ready to Read. So helping to promote these 5 practices. These are all downloadable. We've got book lists, we've got an alphabet mat, activity dice for your story times. We've got posters. We even translated them to Arabic and Spanish this year, as well as the parent and caregiver trifold. So that's our main site on Library of Michigan, but we also have created this new website called Ready to Read Michigan. This is not for you to share with your families. This is for public librarians in the state of Michigan to come to access these materials. So we have created bookmarks, trifold stickers, flyers that you can advertise, and social media prompts and materials, as well as graphics. So for example, if you want to make your own play graphic or use that for social media, or use that as a sign in Storytime, you can download these all. So that link is also in your chat box. And finally, some of you might have been on our call in December of 2020, almost a year ago now, where we revealed this new additional toolkit. This is an addition you could do instead of or as part of a series with the Every Child Ready to Read manual. And you can see here it has family workshops. So we have seedlings, sprouts, and bloomers, as well as early childhood educator workshops, which I'll add. We're hoping to bring training back on this project in 22 so that you can get trained. We are offering my registry sketches for childcare providers, so they need those hours, those points. And so if we get you trained on how to do these early childhood educator workshops, we'll also get you in the system, and then you can offer sketches to childcare providers in your community, which is a big plus here in Michigan. But I think with these trainings here that we've done with Pamela and what you know about Every Child Ready to Read, you could easily step into the seedlings, sprouts, or bloomers programs. You can adapt them. There's lots of tips here. I'm kind of scrolling fast because I don't want to take too much of Pamela's time.
No, it's really great.
There's also a songbook that I wanted to show you. Oh, we also have these great animal action cards. So there's songbook that you can print and give to your families, as well as tip sheets. And then Pamela was talking about signs at your stations. We have those already made for you, all available at those links. And exciting news is I was able to secure funding. I'm getting quotes right now on having this toolkit and some of the materials like the bookmarks and the stickers printed. And because you registered and attended these trainings, you're going to get a shipment to your library from me in hopefully maybe end of December, but maybe not until early in 2022. So when you get a box and you open it up and you're like, what is this? You'll know that this is from your workshop. It's also going to include about a dozen board books from Third Week Books, which they brand it with Ready to Read Michigan. So that's my big announcement for today. Aren't you glad you stayed on? So you'll be getting some freebies soon. Pamela, back to you.
Thanks. Oh, Kathy, that is such great news. Congratulations. It all looks really beautiful and beautifully done. And you Michigan librarians are super lucky to have those resources available. It's so time consuming. I know you all know this, when you're ready to do a program and then you have to make a sign and it doesn't look right, and then I know some libraries where I've worked, they're very particular about branding. And like, if it doesn't look, just so, then you're not supposed to really use it, because it doesn't look good. So we only have like 10 minutes left, so we could go ahead and do this, talk your way through it, or I can just stay on and answer any questions. Is there a preference for doing this, since we don't have a lot of time? Any input?
Why don't you show us talk your way through it in
These
about 5 minutes.
These are the prompts.
Yeah.
Like, what could you say in talk, sing, read, write, and play if you had stations set up for adults around like setting the table, sorting laundry, bath time, kitchen, going to the grocery store, or waiting? So those are the prompts. So we could take 5 minutes and see how it goes, or I can stay on and answer questions, or any other ideas. What do you think? Should we just go ahead and do this for 5 minutes?
Yeah, let's do this for 5 minutes. People can unmute and share their ideas.
Okay. So we're not going into rooms, right?
No, let's just do it as a big group.
Okay. So here's what I've been thinking. So let's say, for kitchen, you did a story time on maybe something with baking, or let's just say baking. What kinds of materials can you put out in your early learning station, and what can you do with them that will have something to do with talk, read, write, sing, and play? Let's start off with pots and pans. What could you do with pots and pans? Anybody? Pots and pans in the kitchen. Clang them together, right? And if you clang them together, what can you talk about then? How can we tie this to talk, sing, read, write, or play, and the idea and a component? Oh yeah, that's fun. Add stories. Add, like, let's say you did stone soup or something. So that's okay. Sing. Okay, you're going fast. So if we're calling ingredients from story, then that's narrative skills, right? Like, let's say you take one of the Thank You Omu recipes. Sing a song about making soup. Let's say you do stone soup, right? Narrative skills, right? Helping to tell and retell stories. How about if they clang them together in a certain rhythm, like the grown-up goes and then the kid bangs? What do you think? Yeah, drum out the syllables of your name, phonological awareness, and different things. Yeah, all right. Thank you, Marisa. Excellent. Well done. How about if you got out a bunch of utensils, like, a spatula, or some, what do you call them? To pick things up. My brain. Tongs. Thank you. I was like, pincher skills, tongs. Thanks, tongs. Yeah. What could you do with them? All the different kinds of utensils. Alphabet soup. Oh, interesting. I've never thought of that. Great idea. And so a lot of people, tongs are great for phone. They're also great if you can remember what they're called. Okay, thanks. Those are a lot of, but you get the idea. If you put out all these things and you put up the stations, that it would really, I think it would be fun. You could use, how about lids, like matching lids, right? Fold our shirts for laundry, right? Name things as you add them to the pot for vocabulary, and taking, like I said, the plastic lids, like empty my closet out of plastic tops and bottoms and see which ones match, right? How are they the same? How are they different? So we already had an idea about with sorting laundry. Let's see you do story time on like clothes, like who wears this, like guessing professions or whatever by clothes. You can sort laundry by attributes, right? Certain labels in the grocery store. Order, yeah, first you put on this, then that. Shirts with letters, which ones have animals, and then you can sort them. How about sorting by size? Comparative, right? How is the same shirt in different sizes? How are they the same and how are they different? Matching socks. Good luck if you can match the socks. I'm usually short at least one. How about making a pattern out of socks? You could do like a plain colored, patterned, plain. Order setting the table night, what items go on the table. Absolutely. How about directions? What do you put up above there? What's next to it? What's on both sides of it? Right? Okay. Any more ideas? How about everyone's favorite thing to do is waiting with a young child. Mittens, yeah, absolutely. Laundry, mittens, Jan Brent. Yeah, any questions since we have 3 more minutes? Letter hunt at the grocery store, coupon matching, I spy in the doctor's office, absolutely. Various methods of I spy, I hear with my little ear. Thank you for bringing a book to the doctor's office, which opens up all the different things you can do with read. Remember, we spent like almost the entire second session on what you can do with a book to develop early literacy skills. Scavenger hunts, yep. Toy animals to make up stories while waiting. Have you ever played like hot and cold? Remember that old game? You'd hide something and tell the child if they're getting hot or cold as they get closer to it. That's good for positional adverbs, which above, below, next to, underneath, which is hard for children to learn. They're so similar to each other and they need a lot of practice. And that is spatial relationships, which is also math. Anything else? Any questions with a couple minutes left? No? Okay. Any other ideas for any of these things? I do hope somebody will try this after a story time and let me know how it goes. I'm thinking of organizing something like this for a family fun night with Head Start parents. I think it has a lot of opportunities for adults to really see how they can make early literacy and learning a part of many aspects of their child's development. Oh, thank you so much, Shelley. It's been a pleasure for me to be with you. Yeah, please do fill out the survey. You're welcome. Thank you to all of you. The survey helps me do a better job the next time I have the opportunity to do this. And also I always get good ideas from all of you. So please do fill them out. I've really appreciated you that have, especially if you've come here all 3 times. It's been really generous of you to share your time with me. I'm glad you have found it helpful. And I have found it to be delightful. And thank you so much, Kathy, for inviting me to do this. I'm glad you have some ideas you can use and you're so welcome. Each and every one of you is so welcome. Good, I'm glad you learned a lot. This makes me feel very good. Thank you for your kind comments. And for all of you, you know what's coming, right? Couldn't end without saying this. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Yeah, you're welcome. Happy Thanksgiving, one and all. I hope you all have so much fun. Thank you. Stay healthy, stay well, and hang in there, everybody. Okay, good. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
And thank you, Pamela, for spending the last 3 weeks with us.
You
really appreciate your time and energy and all this great information.
Good.
Everybody else, look for a follow-up email from us, and maybe those packages will be here in time for the holidays. But if not, look for them in the new year. And thank you all for being here. Have a great Thanksgiving.
Hey, Kathy, can you stay on for a second?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Bye. Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everybody.